My path to art actually started in, I guess, towards the end of 1982, 83. I was serving in a paratrooper unit in Lebanon, and on a trip back home, our convoy fell under attack. Pretty vicious ambush. I arrived back home in Jerusalem, was not able to sleep, and in the morning my neighbor, who was working at Grafos, those who remember Jerusalem back then, decided to bring me a present, a small set of watercolors and a pad. I opened it up, and I just started putting color on the paper, sort of relating to what I had just gone through. Whereas a lot of my peers, would come home from Lebanon, try to drink some of the memories away, try to smoke some of the memories away. For me, it didn't work. And I found that by using these paints and these images, I was able to calm myself, get sort of back into the world. Whatever continued throughout my service. I was released in '84. And just like a good Israeli soldier, as soon as I got out, my first trip to Amsterdam, of course, back then, which was the happening place, and then I went on to the States to continue the trip. While there, I decided I would start studying, finishing going to university there, and I had started studying like a nice little Jewish boy, marketing and business and so on. One of the courses was canceled, and I decided, let me try some painting. I enrolled in School of Visual Arts for an oil painting course. And it was more than love at first sight. It was everything. It encompassed me. I felt truly connected. I dropped all the business courses. My mother called me up from Tel Aviv, and I told her. Within 3 days, she was on her way to New York to convince me not to do that. But thank God it worked out, and I was able to succeed in New York, having shows eventually and supporting myself in my art. With the outbreak of the first Iraqi war, I just could not stay away anymore. In the midst of 2 shows, I simply packed a bag and came back home. Couldn't stay away. And as we've been discussing, we know that the art world is really, it's going up road. And if we mention going in a 4x4, not easy. So here in Israel, I started trying, going to galleries and so on, and I've still continued to sell a bit in the States. And within that year, I also, thank God, I was married, and I decided I had to be a little bit old-fashioned, because those of us in the arts, we know that you don't always sell. Sometimes you're making some money, other times you're eating rice. So I went back, and pretty much I started a job, and I would continue to paint at nights, all in hope that maybe something would happen. We moved out to Shiloh. And there I continued to paint, again in the evenings, until the mayor made me a very interesting offer. Now we're relatively new out on this side of the line. And he said, listen, take over our security. He said, it's nothing. 2 hours a day max. Pay's not great. I'm going to give you a studio. You can go back to your painting. If you would have sold me a bridge then, I would have bought it. And I became the Rav Shatz, the security chief of the yeshuv. Now, still back then in '96, it was relatively quiet. I would have my time to paint. I started painting with kids, also bringing them in. A lot of kids, let's say maybe they left the realm, and it was just something, it was nice. The mention when we spoke about saying artists of Judea and Samaria, I'd never viewed living in Judea and Samaria separating me from the art world. And I think something that was very important, when I started going to Tel Aviv to start looking to doing shows over here, it was the first time that I experienced art bias. I walked into a gallery, then still back then it was slides, and with the resume, as I've been accustomed to in the States, to the various galleries in Europe, and they saw my address. And they said, Shiloh, you're a settler. I said, so what? Well, I don't know whether that's going to fly, whether that's good for marketing. And that was the first time that I realized that I'm an artist of Judea and Samaria. Maybe I'm different. See, until then I thought that art transcended all of that. I didn't think that really politics came in with it. But so be it. That's the way it was. I continued painting, and then, as we've all known, 2000 Intifada came out. And eventually, after about a year and a half of the Intifada around here, and around those of us who live in this area know how intense it was, I stopped. The images were bothering me too much. They wouldn't leave the head. When I had started painting back in the years of the Lebanese War and everything, beauty and chaos seemed to be the topic. And even throughout my time in New York, taking the train, going to night schools, living the nightlife in New York, if you will, along the subways, it was always beauty and chaos. Yet during the chaos of the Intifada, it just took over. And after one of the particular attacks, I just couldn't paint anymore. Eventually, I started going back to it after a few years ago. And I started incorporating it really with a lot of the various work that I do in the security world. Because as artists and painters, you know, we're always being pinned that we see outside of the box. We live outside of the box. And so I have to say that being an artist of Judea and Samaria helped me within my security work. Everything's a painting, everything's composition. Sometimes different, sometimes we look at things different. In fact, we're even expected to see things different as we label ourselves artists. And so I've combined that, the art and security, and they flow together. They even flow together, in fact, during the times in Shiloh. When there'd be times I started painting, yes, they gave me my studio and I was able to paint and it was great. And I would paint for a short time in the mornings. And I remember one of the villages outside of Shiloh, you know, they decided to start throwing rocks on the road and so on. And it was just too much. I needed the art. I needed to paint. I admit that when I found that what art was for me, it was a way for me to speak. It was a way to me to whether get out any emotion, but to communicate. And any time of the violent incidents that would happen, that would cut it off. This particular village, they started throwing stones, and it would always interrupt my painting. And I needed that. I jumped in my Jeep, and I drove into the village, and I started making all hell. And I was called in by the army, by the civilian administration. And they brought in the Palestinian Authority security chief also. And I said, what's going on? I said, I paint during those hours. I need to paint. And if I can't paint, someone's going to pay for it. And an order went out into the village. No one throws stones during these hours. Marc needs to paint. So in a sense, the art sort of brought about peace. I've went back to painting recently, as I still find it my way to talk. I work primarily in oils and landscapes. Photographs. I've been labeled an abstract expressionist. All sorts of things. There is an abundance of art in Judea and Samaria, an abundance of artists from all realms. And we do not label ourselves artists of Judea and Samaria, because out of every artist I've met, they're artists, period. There's no politics. There's no cause to put forth. It's the way we speak, whether it be music, dance, theater, painting, photography, you name it. We're connected to the art because that's who we are. And so when you hear artists of Judea and Samaria, that's a label that everyone else is putting on us. We're just like everybody else. There's no difference. We see the beauty, we see the chaos, we express ourselves in the ways that we find best. And for those that want to give us that label, we will wear it with honor. But we are here. And we live to make art because that's who we are. Thank you.